Well, hello there, Internet. I'm just going to check. I'm doing a Processpod, but I thought I would do one live for a change. Let me just catch that there, which means the chat's up. I'm just getting it up on the screen so I can see it. There we go. So, it is the end of another week. Hi there, it is Salgood Sam here. And we just finished I guess it would be the spring semester for Sin Studio, Intro to Cartooning and Dynamic Drawing. Went well, had a good semester. I really enjoyed the art I got done. Here, I can share this. Let me see. That's the best way to do this, and just drop it on. So we had, how do you pronounce her last name? Sarah Judith. Kayuri. I think it's Sarah Judith Kayuri. Sarah can correct me later. Cool hip hop and violin player. And whoops. Didn't want those to all appear at once, but that's okay. Let's transform. Fit screen and center screen. Okay, good. So let's just clean this up for a second. So there we go. That was the first one I did. Actually, no, that's not the first one I did. Let me see. I think this one. Yeah, that's one of the first early studies. And so that's just really fast. So she was playing live through Zoom for us. So violin and then a hip hop backtrack. Yeah. And then this was the next one. So playing with trying to show an animation of the of her bowing hand. And then she just sat down for the second set. And so I did a couple of her sitting in her kitchen. So I'm pretty happy with how those turned out. And Sarah had a good time too. Hopefully the students enjoyed it. If anyone's interested, I think the early registration period is over, but you can still sign up for my Making Comics class at Sin Studio. It's in Montreal, but we're all online now, like everyone else. So you can take it from anywhere. You got a good connection. And it's an introductory but pretty intensive deep dive into the medium of sequential art and making comics. I think in Canadian money, it comes to over $450, but I'm not sure exactly what the exchange rate is right now. And it's 10 classes. We're going to make a lot of comics and cover all the working parts of the medium. If you've never made comics before and you're interested, or if you are a practitioner and you want to up your game, I think that could work for either case. And just be prepared to do a lot of work, because there's a lot of making comics outside the class after we finish our classes. We'll do some making comics in the classes too, but in the end, comics are a very labor-intensive process. So expect and plan to be committing a fair bit of time to homework, which, if you like making comics, doesn't really work at all. I was just watching. I'm still going to go back and watch in a bit. The interview with Ho Chi Anderson on the Cartoonist Kayfabe. I've seen a few cool interviews with him. We've never actually met in a serious way. I know him on social media. I've added him, friended him a while back, and I think I remember meeting him sort of very briefly in passing, like being introduced, but then never really talking at conventions and stuff. And it's funny because we have a lot of mutual friends, and I'm actually only about a year younger than him, and coming up in the comic scene in Toronto right at the same time he was, just talking about going to Vortex when he was a teenager. I went there a little later to check it out. They had already moved to Was it Atlantic? Across the street from Nelvana. Crazy place. And I never ended up doing work with them. The Bill, the publisher, immediately set off my alarm bells. I grew up, my father was a dealer, pot dealer mainly. But because of that early exposure to counterculture and stuff, I kind of had radar for people who were a little sketchy. And Bill screamed Coke. Just checking something. Vortex. I don't really need to know this. Vortex Comics. But I'm suddenly wondering now, do they even mention? They probably don't even mention, do they? But like all the references he makes and talks about, these were all things I used to go to the Dragon Lady and Silver Snail the same time he was. Yeah. I was not. I had the same kind of like, he talks about having a lot of like, stupid bravado as a young guy, and I can relate to that. But there was one area that I did not have the confidence he did, was as a writer. So I didn't have an in with a place like Vortex because they wanted writer artists. They wanted creators. That was at least the way it was built to me as a young guy coming in. And I think I talked to some Vortex people at conventions, and I definitely knew Ty. He was a mentor, and Bernie Moreau. And Bernie wasn't a Toronto guy, but he was at the Toronto conventions a lot. And I, being dyslexic as a kid, and functionally until I was 25 and decided to do something about it more aggressively, I was sort of functionally illiterate. Like I could read actually quite well, but I couldn't write. And I found reading tedious. I would do it for things I was really interested in. Like I read fiction because I really enjoyed the fiction, so I would do the work for it. Although I would put myself to sleep reading a chapter pretty much. It would knock me out. Depends on the chapters we're talking about, but just the mental effort of dealing with focusing. I never had the like eye dancing thing that some people describe in dyslexia, but I definitely had a hard time focusing my attention and then keeping track and not rereading lines. So there'd be a lot of strain, and I just never really tried to write. So I didn't have any confidence in my ability as a writer. And so I always, when I started pushing myself as an artist, I think when he was being crazy aggressive, Hoche, trying to like shop his stuff around and just not ready yet, I was still, till I was 18, I was still in high school, making zines with my friends at Wexford CI. So I was making comics, but I didn't think I was ready to try to sell my stuff to anybody. And then at 19, I teamed up with the comic shop owner that I knew to do a story for Caliber Press. We sold it to Caliber Press. Well, sold. Got a deal with Caliber Press to publish it. And it's funny, I just did the same thing Hoshi did in his interview. We did a True North 2 story. So his store was one of the shops. He got busted. Planet Earth Comics. Al Roy was one of the 2 owners. Technically, there were 3 owners. Father of the other guy was involved as an investor as well. And right around then, the police across Canada were pulling some shenanigans. They were going into comic shops. These are adult men, not kids, in plain dress, buying books like Black Kiss, which came in bags, and other adult comics that were behind the counter, and then coming back in and busting the retailers for selling porn to minors, which they weren't doing. So the Comic Legends Defense Fund, I think it's called, Legal Defense Fund, Comic Legends Legal Defense Fund, which is the Canadian equivalent, a branch, basically, of the Comics Legal Defense Fund in the U.S. And they'd done True North 1 for a round of busts and things that had happened a few years before that that were similar. And so True North 2 was a fundraiser to help pay for the court fees for the retailers who were busted in the second round. And one of them was my collaborator on Nature of the Beast, which was the the book we got to deal with Caliber for. So we did a little 4-pager. Way too much freaking lettering. It's insane. I actually have it here on my drive. I'll show you guys. Alroy wrote it, and then it was like EC Comics. I crammed in some pictures in places that were left over. I did lettering to myself. I was pretty pleased with it. Drew it super big, like way larger than just the usual 60% up. Where would it be? It would be under there, and all the work. I'm looking through my drives, and Captain Censored versus Dr. Goingtofar. Yeah, it was fun, but a nightmare. So much text, and being dyslexic again, and doing the lettering. I almost don't want to know how many typos got past us and into print. What did it do with it? Let's see. Let's see if I can do a search. So I did that with Al. And I had an idea for a science fiction comic. I'd read Larry Niven's Integral Trees, and I really loved it. And I loved the idea of I don't know what he called them again. The donuts of air around a star. So in Integral Trees, humans have evolved to live in a place where there isn't a planet. It's just gas and a giant donut. And then there are these tree-like things that float around and they spin and then get gravity at the ends and stuff that they live on. That was a really cool concept. And I totally lifted that idea, but I wanted to do it as essentially it was a furry comic. I wanted it to be a science fiction story where the humans hadn't survived the crash of a colony ship in this environment, but their pets had. So we had mice and cats that had evolved into humanoids. I was a teenager. What are you going to do? I loved things. I loved early furry comics. This is before furry was only kinky, although I did read Omaha the Cat Dancer, which was a little kinky, to say the least. But I just ran to search my drive and find all sorts of stuff with captains, but not my. Let's see. DR going too far. And I really wanted to do like the 0G comic with these elongated 0G, so they'd grown very long, feline humanoids who lived in trees alongside a mouse mammal type thing. And there was going to be the remnants of humans who'd become cyborgs, and they were sort of like mad hordes that would harass and terrorize my characters. But I had no confidence about writing this stuff. So I pitched the idea to Al, who was one of the clerks at my regular shop locally, Planet Earth Comics. I used to go to a couple other places, Queen Comics. It was moved to King Street later on. I did a poster for them when I was like 15 or so. And there were a couple other shops I'm blanking on the names of right now. But later on in my mid to late teens, Planet Earth Comics opened up on Queen Street and in the beaches in Toronto, and I was a regular there, and Al would talk about being a writer. So I approached him about taking on this idea that I'd come up with and writing it, and he did. To my chagrin, he changed it into a basically Lord of the Rings inspired thing. It had become so. He got rid of the weird science fiction setting and just put it on a planet. And our main characters lived in a giant tree, and I could probably find that really quickly. And yep, there it is. Let's see, view. Large icons. Giant tree. There we are. Here's the giant tree. This is from the printed book. I scanned it later on. fit to screen. So that's some of my early work. There's some Zipatone in there. I was definitely cribbing notes for looking at Dave McKean's art a lot. So some of the lighting around that character's face in the top right, I think, is definitely inspired by things I was looking at. And by this time, I'm like 18, 19, getting into 20. I redrew the first issue of Nature of the Beast like 2 or 3 times because I was not happy with my stuff. So like the first time I was drawing it, I was around 16 or 17. And then I drew a book and a bit and then chucked it all. There's a page here that I really like. I was very happy with how this came out. So this was a good one. Transform. The screen. There we go. Let's get that other one out of there. So that's a 2-page spread, but you had to rotate it sideways to see it all. Here, let's fit. Fit horizontal? Oh, no, that's flip horizontal. So let's just do this. Yeah. Oh. Okay, not letting me let go. Do that again. Transform. There we go. I can just do this. Pan it around. So you can see. And the first issue of this is from the second issue. For the first issue, I had a local letterer do the lettering, but I got the confidence up to do it by the second one. So this is the second issue. I think I did the Captain Censored versus Dr. Goingtofar between the first and second issue of this. And lettering all of that crazy comic, I became bold enough to do this lettering. A lot of splatter. And so, yeah, Al turned it into a Lord of the Rings kind of horror comic thing that I was sort of into, but it wasn't quite what I wanted to be doing. And then, to my disappointment, not that I don't mind killing characters, but he started very early on killing off characters felt like we were just starting to develop and I liked, but also in ways that felt. I think the thing that bothered me more is that he did them in ways that I felt were exploitive. And in issue 3, I ended up walking because he wanted me to take what I thought was one of the most interesting, strongest characters and have a demon bite her tits off, which I just was not down with drawing. And it was, I think he wanted to go outlaw comic style, which I was never into outlaw comics that much. Like there was some of the stuff that I really liked because of the art, but I didn't like him because of the violence. And I had issues with gratuitous stuff that didn't seem to be serving any other purpose than shock. So we had a parting of ways. And then what did I do after Nature of the Beast? I had some other ideas, and I started doing a comic with a girlfriend of mine, Dog's Breakfast. And that probably would have been fun. I wish I'd sort of stuck that one out. But a few different things happened, including me getting interested in trying to pursue work at Marvel, and also that relationship coming to an end. So I think I did about a dozen or so pages for that story, but then I didn't follow through, and I went and worked for Marvel in DC for a brief period of time, mostly Marvel. Did not like that experience, and then that's when I started deciding around 25 or so that I needed to learn how to write. So all to say, I found that confidence later, but I relate to a lot of things Hochi was talking about in terms of pursuing stuff early on and what the scene was like, because we were coming up very similar times. He got a little earlier start trying to pursue work with publishers, and he's a year older than me. So between those two things, he was able to do things like form a strong relationship with Seth and as a mentor, who I was aware of. I knew I'd run into a few times, the old white goth Seth, before he became a nostalgia fiend. I don't think that Seth back then really knew my name or anything, but I used to cross paths with him and stuff. And would eavesdrop while he was talking about Medium. And I'd met Dean Water in passing a couple of times, but not like, again, I don't think he knew my name. I did have a few, so like I said, I knew Ty, and I would go and show him at his, after I met him at conventions a few times, I got to know where his studio was, and by the time I was 20 or 21, I was living just north of it a few blocks. So I would go by his studio and show him my work and get feedback. And yeah, anyway, just go check it out. Brand new interview with Ho Chi Anderson on the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Pretty solid stuff. It's interesting. We're doing, so Sam Noir and I have been doing interviews. We haven't done a new one since, I think, since the last time I recorded one of these. Yeah, no, it was last week. So definitely haven't. But we're gonna do a few more. I think 2 more, and I'm gonna start editing them. I've got one with Robin Bougie, and I'm blanking everyone's names right now. Some of the Raid Studio folks, the Toronto Comics people, they went really well. I think the Robin Bougie one, I wish I'd read more of his comics before we did the interview, but I went and ordered a bunch of his sleazy slices yesterday or the day before. So I'm looking forward to reading those. I might actually want to do a follow-up interview after I read them. It's one of those ones where I think I will want to. We also went really long. We're almost 2 hours, so I need to go in and edit it for time. I don't want it to be a 2 hour long video necessarily. And there's enough moments of me asking things like, "So this is really working well?" And he's like, "No, it's not working." I'm like, "Oh." Tell you, the people who do adult comics in this business have it rough, because there's the usual stereotype that comics are for kids, and that is not so prevalent anymore, thanks to literary comics, underground comics, to a certain degree, breaking those walls down, but not really fully. A lot of people walk around with this concept of comics being these children's media, and so they really get nailed hard when they do X-rated content or adult content. If they try to sell online, and this is true for anyone who does like erotic photography or burlesque performers like that, there's payment processing issues. Stripe and PayPal both refuse to process payments for adult content. There are some alternatives, but they're not so straightforward or easy to use. And they also have issues with things like crowdfunders. I think I was just looking, and after I talked to Robin and then passed on the information to him, that Indiegogo has added an adult section. It's not necessarily content, because they also do it for like adult sex toys, stuff like that. But they'll let you do a crowdfunder for adult content, so that's good. But it's rough. PayPal, you can kind of get away with it. You can't really. But so what you can do is you could be, say, someone like Bougie or a pinup artist or a model, and have content that only patrons can see. So exclusive content that's adult. But if any of your public-facing content is even remotely considered problematic, they do all sorts of stuff. And then also you don't show up in search at all as having if you have adult content. So it's all entirely on you to promote your stuff, which isn't like the worst thing in the world, but it kind of sucks for these people. They don't get any of the discovery side of things, where people stumble on your work, and they can't take advantage of something like Kickstarter, where one of the biggest pluses of Kickstarter now is it becomes such a go-to portal to check things out that a lot of people will have their content discovered by people who are looking for things to back just by browsing. They didn't necessarily know about it or know anything about it. They just stumble across it. Adult content creators can't do that. So it's become really tough for a lot of them. It's ironic because there was a period there, well, I guess ironic since that's quite the word, but there's a period there in the 80s and 90s where they faced legal issues sometimes, but on the whole, the market was pretty strong, and you could make a decent living doing adult comics. It was never something that I was especially keen on, but I knew people who did, and that has collapsed. It's a little sad hearing some of the contrast between the kind of sales that Robin's Cinema Sewer used to enjoy and what he generally expects to see now in terms of sales. So hey, you know what? You should check that out. Let me give you a URL. Cinema Sewer. If you just Google Cinema Sewer, you will find cinemasewer.storeenvy.com, and you can get all of his Sleazy Slice comics. I'm looking forward to seeing those. So I'll spell that out for you. CINEMASEWER.storeenvy.com. Go check it out. Comics, his art is amazing, even if you're not particularly keen on kinky naked girl comics. And he does it too. He's very he's into like sort of body positive stuff. So you'll find all sorts of women depicted in his stuff, but it's not just your kind of usual predictable pinup girl stuff. Which is one of the reasons I appreciate it, even though I'm not a keen avid reader of erotic comics or something like that. I really like looking at Robin's art because it's just really fun to look at, and it's usually funny. Usually he has a great sense of humor, and his stories are very playful. There was one, I think it's a Sleazy Slice story. There was like a cyborg. It's like superhero porn comic. It's very goofy, tongue in cheek. It's good stuff. Yeah. I had other thoughts I was going to ramble about. What was I going to talk about? But this is getting kind of long. Nostalgia. Starting off decades ago. It was interesting listening to Hoche talk about it, like his... I don't know if it was regret he's expressing. I'll go back and watch some more. But his looking at his early choices and lamenting. For example, he took a long time doing King, his graphic novel biography of just blank on King's first name. Malcolm, not Malcolm. King Jr. Martin. It is Martin Luther King Jr. You know me, man. It sucks. His biography is really cool, but it also has this interesting transitional layered effect because he started it when he was really young, and then he came back to it periodically over time to finish it. So the book has like 3 or 4 distinct stages and switches to full color at the end. And I always knew, like as a practitioner, that was partially a reflection of the time between books. But I also agree with Jim Rugg in the interview was saying it adds this extra interesting layer to the story and how it evolves. And so I don't think there's any loss because of it. But Hoshi was talking in the interview about how if he had it to go back to, he would try to do it in one shot because it probably would have been way better for sales and it would have felt more like it was of a piece. But then he's sort of acknowledging that probably as a young guy, he wasn't quite there yet to be able to do the whole thing and probably couldn't have given it the denouement that it deserved when he was younger. But I have a lot of admiration for his bravery being a writer that young. You know, I definitely knew I wasn't up to it. I had other insecurities because of my dyslexia that were like undermining my confidence in that department. But I also just realized I did not understand how to structure a story, and not enough yet. And so I was just always shied away from it. And it really wasn't until around 95, when I was 25, that I was like, okay, well, I really don't like what I'm getting from writers, and I feel like on an intuitive level I should be able to do better. I think I know how to do better. But I'm going to have to learn how to do it because there's a lot of the mechanics and basic functional doing that I don't get. So that's when I cracked down to it. I started blogging then. The web had gotten launched about a year beforehand. And I had a website because I did a deal, a local internet service provider startup. A friend of mine connected me with him through Sneaky D's, the bar I used to hang out at. You comic fans will know it well from Scott Pilgrim, but Brian was of a later generation that used to hang out at Sneaky D's. I'm about 10 years older than him. I think so. And used to hang out there when it was a punk bar. And a lot of early .com folks were regulars there. I remember when people started going on about like, oh, I got this great new job, man. They got pinball machines and a bar and an espresso machine. And you could sleep in the work and stuff. And they were all going, oh, how great it was, but the job didn't have benefits. And it sounded like they were working them really hard. And they're like, you sure this is a good deal? And I just bribing you with shit? I was right. They were bribing with shit. But one of the coders that I knew went and bought himself a whole bunch of servers and decided to become an ISP. And I was introduced to him as someone who could do graphics for him because I got myself a Mac 2 LC, Mac LC, not Mac, no, Mac LC 2. I think that's what it was, in 91, and had some basic skills in that department. I went to computer camp too, but I never really got hardcore into coding. I know how to do it, but I need a handbook. I can't code from memory or anything. But I did graphic design for them, and I ended up doing so little for them in exchange for dial-up, infinite dial-up, and a website. Although it had a tilde in the URL, and it was just like my name. I tagged on to this ISP's name too. It wasn't like it was a subdomain. But I wasn't big, nothing had gotten that fancy yet. I don't think I actually registered a domain until 99 or so. I think 98 I registered salgosam.com. I think so. But I took my time. But I did have, if you do Wayback Machine, you can find my very first comics website. Although a little of my comics are on it, but mostly I published other friends' comics. I took a couple friends of mine zines and with their permission scanned the stuff and put it up on as webcomics. And then I was still constantly waffling, and like I would write something and then hate it, because that's what happens when your first writing skills. I did a memoir comic called Scratch, which I intentionally misspelled, and I once found I was working at Nelvana part-time at the time. Well, actually not part-time, for a short time. That's not what I meant to say. And I used the copy machines in Nelvana, and this really large animation paper to photocopy it. So I had this oversized zine, and it was a memoir or autobiographical story. I haven't done a lot of autobiographical comics, but I was experimenting with it, and I did one about a trip to Montreal and going to a comic jam. Gavin McInnes is in it. I thought he was an asshole early on, and I was correct. I found a copy of the zine at Nelvana in a emptied out room. So one of the shows had shut down and people cleared out. And I found my zine rolled up in the garbage can, and someone had gone with red color erase pencil. And they'd like circled the spelling mistakes in the cover, which were intentional. I knew that it was spelled differently, but I did it as an automatopoeia. It was a sound effect. And I was having fun with that because to me it was all a laugh. But then they went through the entire book and highlighted all my typos, which I was kind of like, well, that's shitty, but at the same time, thanks. That's useful. I'll go back and fix those now. I think I did 4 or 5 other zines along those lines before I even began to come close to feeling kind of confident as a writer. Which, if I had to go back, a do-over, I think that's definitely the thing I would have addressed first. I would have done more independent underground comics, and I would have worked on my writing before working on Marvel. Or I would have done the Marvel thing and just been more aggressive in dealing with the editorial bullshit. Maybe that would have gotten me out of there faster. But just put more books under my belt and squirreled some of that money away. Either way. I'm turned 50 this year in September, and it's interesting looking back. Not that many regrets, but there's always things that you wish you'd kind of if you knew now, what would you do differently? Lots of those. Always will be lots of those. Anyway, I think again, making comics next semester. I gotta clean up my studio from the last semester. The kipple has grown to the point of becoming monstrous. Gotta get it under control. Get back to Crowning for Lessons, the comic I've been working on. I posted a couple of pencil and thumbnailing videos last week, live streams. I'll be doing some more of those. And I just upgraded my computer, got a new SSD to run the OS on, cloned it over. So I'm going to sit down and see if it works any better trying to draw a dream life, which I'm doing all digitally, and was running into issues with. Let's see if that helps. And yeah, that's what's up with me. What's up with you? Let's see, did anyone say anything in the chat before I log out? Nope. It's funny. You guys are all in there. And, I think I mentioned in a previous video, but again, a bunch of folks sort of warned me about going political with my comics, or my videos, on YouTube. A week ago when I did that one about symbols. I want to follow that up, actually, because things have changed so much since then, and I still feel like what I was saying was true, but I've had some interesting updates and information insights. The whole autonomous zone thing, Capitol Hill and Seattle, that's fascinating. But people were like, "Oh, don't go political, man. Oh, bad for your channel." That video has like 3 or 4 times the number of views that most of my videos get these days. So yeah, it didn't hurt me. Sorry. I should probably do more political videos. That's the good advice. I should probably do one a week. One political soapbox of rah. Just to remind anyone who's maybe new to this channel and is thinking, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. You don't want to convert to this." I'm not converting anything. I've always been political. I'm the child of radicals. So there might be a little more of that too. But although it's not really what this channel is about, I am not. It's about me, and that is a part of me. So I'm not about to shy away from it. But in the meantime, I'll just say this. Go wash your hands. The pandemic isn't over. Numbers are going up because people are getting sloppy. I don't care if you're bored. The virus doesn't care. It's just biding its time. Do you know they just found that there's a study out of Scripps that found that there's possibly, well, not possibly, it has to be peer-reviewed to confirm, but a very experienced researcher who's got 20 years of experience with the corona family under their belt has identified a mutation in the what do they call them, spike proteins, the things that give it the crown-like appearance, that makes them more efficient in strains that are very... So these are small mutations. They're probably not technically strains, but small mutations in the viruses that they see the most often in Italy and New York, which might explain why those places got really bad. But Montreal's numbers are not good. And I'm not surprised. We went to the hardware store, Canada Tire. It's a big box style hardware store in the next neighborhood over from where we live a couple days ago. And dude, Montrealers, not enough of you are wearing masks. It's bad enough out in the public. I guess I don't entirely begrudge people for not wearing a mask when you're on the street if there's nobody else around or there's a good distance between people. But people were wearing no masks and not staying out of other people's personal space, getting really close, like walking right up to within a half a foot of me, and being oblivious on the sidewalk, which is frankly kind of normal in Montreal. Sidewalk walkers, they walk like they're the only people in the world and everyone else can get out of the fuck of their way. They're assholes that way. I don't like it. But the fact that they're doing that without masks on, not cool, man. Go get a mask. And then if you go inside a store, you should really fucking wear a mask. It's not to stay safe. It's to protect others. It's a common courtesy. I can tell you at least 2/3 or more like 3/4 of the people in that Canada Tire were not bothering. Not even the staff. Hey, Canada Tire, you suck. You're not making your staff wear masks? Come on. Lead by example. Make us line up outside so you understand it's an issue. All right. Go wash your hands. Make more comics. Stay tuned and subscribe to the Sequential channel. It's going to be in my channel's channel list on the front page. And some interviews will be going up there soon. And I will see you around the internets. Toodles.